Episode 23. What right do you have to use me? Hearing Natalie's screams, Tom walked over with a frown and shouted angrily, "You ungrateful child! I raised you, and not only have you disgraced our family, you dare to say such outrageous things. You should call Bryce right now, or else you'll never walk out of this place." Natalie's entire body went cold. She acknowledged what she hadn't seen before, that her father, who she had once respected, was really like this. In her heart, she was worried about Liam, so she said straightforwardly, "Bryce and I are not connected to each other in any way. We have no relationship at all. You can't imprison me forever. Just let me go." Cheryl snickered. The ridicule was obvious in her eyes. "Like I said, why would someone like Bryce fall for you?" She recalled the bullying she and Nick had suffered at the party and grew even angrier. She continued with a sneer. "The reason he said those things at the party was because he thought you were pitiful. You aren't brave, Natalie. You're despicable." Natalie glared furiously at her sister as she brought up the past. She bit her lips tightly to prevent herself from crying. As long as they let her go, it didn't matter if she was despised. But she had underestimated her family's heartlessness. The truth about her and Bryce had left Tom fuming. He said coldly, "It's better if the child dies, or else he will only embarrass me. As for you, you will marry Mr. Wilson. You will enjoy endless wealth and prosperity. You can thank me later." Natalie sneered. Her entire body trembled with anger. He wanted her to marry that old man. If she did that, she would never have a happy life. They really had thought everything through, and now they were just waiting to watch her make a fool of herself? Impossible. "I won't marry anyone. Since you've already disowned me, I have nothing to do with you anymore. What right do you have to use me? You greedy devils! Let me out!" Looking at her father, she felt a sense of unfamiliarity and coldness. She wanted to rip their faces off. It might be true that she had shamed the family, but Liam was innocent. He was such a young child, and yet they were so heartless toward him. They were simply cold-blooded. If she hadn't been locked in this room, she felt that she would have done it. She would have attacked them. She was furious. This home, which she once risked her life to protect, had completely destroyed her in the end. Tom frowned and retreated a few steps when he saw the fury in Natalie's eyes. He glanced impatiently at Natalie before turning around to leave. She panicked and screamed with all her might, "Let me out! Let me out!" He paused. Without even looking at her, he continued, "I've already arranged with Mr. Wilson that he will meet with you tomorrow. If you know what's good for you, you won't do anything stupid." As they left, the despair in Natalie's eyes grew even more intense. She lowered her head and let out a hoarse cry. When she thought about Liam's cute, innocent face, she couldn't stop crying. She swore that if anything happened to him, she would kill them all and let them join him in death. She should never have come back here. Every minute and every second was torture. It wasn't until the afternoon of the next day that someone came to the room. 2 burly men walked in and pulled Natalie up from the ground without a shred of pity. She didn't even have the strength to fight back. She knew that she was going to see Mr. Wilson. As she thought about this, she secretly observed her surroundings, waiting for an opportunity to escape. She was brought to the dining table. Around it sat a few people, all rich and powerful. She refused to move, but the burly man beside her brought her over to Mr. Wilson and the others. Because she was going to see Mr. Wilson, Tom had had someone change her clothes. Her hair and cheeks were done up slightly, which made her pretty face look even more charming. Mr. Wilson stared at her without blinking. He praised Tom repeatedly. "Mr. Davidson, you sure are fortunate. Your 2 daughters are so beautiful." As he said this, his eyes never left Natalie. His lustful gaze made her nauseous. The man looked to be in his 40s. She turned her face away in disgust, but one of the bodyguards forced her to sit beside him. Tom glared fiercely at her. He smiled apologetically at Mr. Wilson and said, "You are too kind. My eldest daughter is just a savage little girl. She's lucky that you like her." Mr. Wilson was very satisfied with these words, and he ignored the clear dislike in Natalie's eyes. After all, she was a woman, and meeting an unfamiliar man for the first time would inevitably make her uncomfortable. He would change her mind. Tom gave Natalie a meaningful glance and said, "What are you sitting there for? Why don't you drink a glass of wine with Mr. Wilson?" The waiter tactfully poured a glass of wine for her, but she just sat there and watched, unmoved. Mr. Wilson felt insulted. He squinted his eyes and said with a sneer, "Mr. Davidson, I think your daughter is unwilling." Tom's face darkened for a moment as he silently cursed this daughter of his for spoiling his plans. But he couldn't get angry at her while other people were around. He could only smile apologetically again. "My daughter has just returned from overseas and is still not familiar with the etiquette here. Please don't mind her." He raised his glass and hurriedly toasted Mr. Wilson. "We will be family soon. Let me drink this wine to show my respect." Mr. Wilson's expression lightened. He nonchalantly brought the glass of wine to his lips for a sip and looked at Natalie. He looked as if he couldn't wait to strip her of her clothes. His undisguised desire made her want to vomit. At the other end of the table, Bryce was chatting with a friend when he spotted Natalie. His eyes squinted dangerously. So she was also here. What a coincidence. He wouldn't have to look for her.